evolving. It's not necessarily negative. But if we all have that fear built in our genetics, which is a real thing, if you get triggered by it, like I see spiders and they freak me out, but I've gotten over that fear. I just step on them now. And you wonder...
Have you?
Well, if I saw like a tarantula, I definitely would be in the corner. Acting really cool, like I had to take a phone call. I gotta take a phone call, guys, over here in the corner. You guys deal with that tarantula? It's fine. It's gonna be great.
He looked at me funny too.
Yeah, but what are you trying to get at there? Are you trying to say that like the fall of Atlantis and that event wiped out a huge population of the planet at a particular time? We now know that most likely civilization was a lot older than we think it is and was a lot more advanced in antiquity, and it all got wiped out and restarted. It was an apocalypse,
right? In
both ways. In both, it actually physically got wiped out, and it was a restart of things. That's what probably the stories of the Bible and other ancient texts talk about.
And the warnings, right?
And the warnings. And then that event that wiped out Atlantis, are we all dealing with the suffering of that?
We
feel it through generations from our past lives reading that we had. We all were Atlanteans. And we didn't really go too much into it, but she talked about how like I was a scientist and trying to help with something and things went wrong and blah, 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 blah. And I wonder if like that event has just been echoing through time and we all feel it and it bubbles up when like life isn't right. You feel that sense, you know?
Right. Well, I think that there's, if what happened in Atlantis is true, that they overused their power, then it's a warning for like, you can't overpower Mother Earth. You have to find a balance. So for instance, in ancient text, some people call the group before Atlantis. So if Atlantis was before Egyptian times, ancient Egyptian times, before ancient Sumer, before Atlantis was, some people call this group Lemurians, Lemuria.
Yeah, I've heard that.
But they're actually called the Mu, to other people or studies.
Do you know where that name comes from, Lemuria, by the way?
It's from a French guy who named it after a monkey.
Lemurs.
Yes.
Yeah.
Lemuria.
That's where it comes from.
Mm-hmm. So he just named it Lemuria, but but that's fine because people were basically talking about the same people. But for some reason that got translated that you're an Lemurian versus an Atlantean.
Yeah.
Okay, whatever. But it's called Mu.
Yeah.
Same people. But the Mu were a people that didn't build big structures. They worked with the energies of the earth. They were just as powerful as the Atlanteans, except they didn't build like a network, like a conscious network, like the Atlanteans did, which is kind of like this all connective kind of like you see these pictures. If you see pictures of Atlantis, they're like these crystal towers, right? They connected with the Earth's energy. And so when the Atlanteans were said, no, we're taking this over, the last battle that took place between this older civilization and Atlantis for power of the earth was in the Middle East, which is ironic because we're still fighting there today.
That's interesting.
But that was the last where the Mu gave up their power. They said, fine, you can have control of the earth. But the way they controlled the earth was building these massive structures of technology, and it didn't fit with the frequency of the earth, and it crumbled.
So where are you getting this in? Because I know there's like 100 different versions of what happened with Atlantis and how it fell and all that sort of stuff. Where are you taking your stuff from?
So the battle with Mu and Atlantis is not how Atlantis fell. It was just more that's when that culture took over the planet. And that's where
the culture that eventually led to the destruction.
It led to the destruction, correct. But as far as the understanding of Lemuria/Mu, definitely a lot of books I've read, and then Matthias, who I've interviewed before, who kind of channels this like time period of Atlantis and Mu, because they coexisted for quite some time. Like you'll notice that from the southwest of the United States all the way through, I think, Vietnam, like on the other, that was all Mu territory. So you think of like the Hawaiian Islands, like Australia, like all the way to that side, like that was like the Mu culture. Like they were not building massive connective buildings. They were just connecting with the earth, but they were just as powerful. It was just using the frequency of the earth.
Interesting.
So they use natural monuments, mountains. Like in the Southwest, there's like Shiprock Park. There's like a huge rock formation. It's like a shiprock. It's supposed to have like power. That's what I mean by
it's like Uluru in Australia. The big used to be called Ayers Rock, but it's like a big, huge rock in the middle of Australia, and it's like this big sacred place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was part of the Mu culture.
Okay.
So you'll like even notice a split in the United States. It's just because the same vibe is the same. So if you like from the Southwest on, there's a completely different vibe of the United States than if you go from the southwest to the east.
You mean geologically or just in...
No, just in different like structures of even town society, right? So the East Coast feels a lot different than the West Coast.
Sure, yeah.
It's not just because they want to be different. It's because there's like a different energy there, because all around the East Coast of the United States was Atlantean territory. Let's talk about Atlantis being in the Caribbean or Bermuda, right? Like all that evidence of these ancient buildings. But that's why Atlantis wasn't just in one location. There's Atlantean buildings in Europe. There's in Greece and Italy. There's, there's all these pieces of Atlantic territory. Even off the coast of Ireland, which is supposed to be a spot for Atlantis.
So are Atlantis bad guys then?
No, I don't think that they're bad people. It's just a culture. It's a different way of using the Earth's energy. And I think it just didn't work.
But so the Mu and the Atlanteans were... eventually came to blows, right?
So then they had their final, where the Mu just gave up. They surrendered. They're like, okay, we're not going to fight you anymore. But that happened in the Middle East. So that last battle between those two cultures, existing as two different cultures on the planet, happened in the Middle East.
Interesting.
Yeah, it is pretty interesting.
Ended up the first civilization in modern times or after antiquity was Sumer.
Which is right in that spot.
Yeah, interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I don't think like the fall of Atlantis isn't because they're bad people. I think that the infrastructure, and this is kind of a warning too, the infrastructure of everyone being connected into this technology. But then some people didn't want to be connected to the technology. They wanted to change the technology. Well, now the whole conscious network is off because somebody went rogue.
Right.
Right? And so now you've changed the frequency of the whole conscious network. So it's actually, it kind of goes into that story of like, okay, well, you can create a conscious network, but everybody needs to be on the same page. Because once people start breaking off, or you just don't have one. You have people individually bringing their own vibration to the planet.
Huh. That seems like it's paralleling a little bit what's happening today.
Right.
With the internet and the technology and how we're becoming a technology-dependent civilization. Everyone's hooked in all the time, but there is a push now to be away from that. There is like a push to be away from technology, to reconnect with Earth, to be barefoot, to be, to be more hippy-dippy, which is not a bad thing,
Right.
And like there's a war going on now, you could say, between those two fractions, although it's not split up into societies necessarily.
No, definitely not. But it's just a feeling, right?
Yeah.
It's a feeling. It's a different feeling. But I don't think there's anybody like that's bad. I think it's just a society that built something that eventually didn't work. It like worked against itself. Yeah. Because not everybody wanted to be on the same page. And so the whole thing kind of crumbled.
Like our energy systems.
Like our energy systems now.
Right.
So it's like we all know. This whole thing with the end of days, like this thing is going to happen. It's like we all know, and it's this fear, yet we don't know where it comes from.
Do you know exactly how Atlantis fell or what the stories say about it? Like what exactly went down? Is there any good information?
Some stories say it was like a gradual breakdown. Others say it was like this catastrophic event that kind of it instantly wiped it out. There's
like some crazy science was going down and they pushed something too hard.
Yeah. Yeah, it was like a nuclear war was another thing.
Yeah, there's the story of I don't know. There's so many stories. He's right. There's the nuclear war, like literally, like one just blew up, and then that was it.
Yeah.
Because they're like these crystal palaces, basically, that are harboring all this energy on the planet, and then somebody blew it up. So there's this war. I don't know. There's so many stories, but the thing is, it fell.
And it sunk, right? Wasn't that the whole thing? Yeah. The whole island. I mean, the base of operations, I guess, of Atlantis sunk underneath the oceans.
Yep. But there's so many places for Atlantis. That's the thing. It's because Atlantis was all over the world, right? Especially after...
It wasn't one city.
It wasn't just society. One city. Like East Coast United States, all across Europe. So all these places that everyone's like, this is a site for Atlantis. Like, yes, and yes, and yes, and yes.
Are all the ancient pyramids connected to Atlantis? Or are they built after the time of Atlantis? You know how like there's new information out there, they might be a lot older, people outside of academia. Like how they all popped up in the world at the same time. Like, what one always fascinated me was the pyramids off the coast of Japan that are underwater.
Yes.
That's like a clear sign of something bad went down and you lost your society,
Right.
And then why are there these awesome structures underwater that no one can really say what they are,
Right. Yeah, there's definitely, especially the Great Pyramid, I think, in Egypt is is just, it's such a monument in itself against all the other monuments, even the other pyramids on the Giza Plateau, that it says, who built this? Compared to like the other ones, like somebody tried to mimic the building.
The smaller ones in Egypt don't have the same tech in them. No. They don't have the same level of intricacy in like the blocks aren't as big or whatnot.
Yeah, the blocks aren't that big, but the building is completely different. So somebody tried to mimic it. Like that's the thing. Like, but the Great Pyramid is just so amazingly intricate that you're like, okay, well, somebody else built this one.
Right, that's weird.
And like a very long time ago.
Yeah.
Because you think that they would get better, but they don't. They get worse. The building techniques.
Oh, that's interesting.
Of the pyramids.
Huh. I think I've heard that before, where the pyramids that came after the Great Pyramid were trying to copy that original one, because whatever the original one did back in the day, you know, when it was covered in, was it quartz or something?
Limestone?
It was like white, right?
No, the outside. Well, the outside was covered with casing stones. Some people say it was gold, but I'm not sure if it was gold for the
I thought
Great
it was
Pyramid.
white.
I always heard it was reflected. You could see it way in the distance.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So it might have been white.
All that stuff.
But it was definitely a casing stone.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But anyway, there was some sort of technology that did something special, and then civilization that followed that tried to copy that, and then built their own pyramids and didn't know how to work whatever the Great Pyramid did, but they tried. They gave it the old college try.
They tried.
Well, I think like the lesson with Atlantis falling is that they created these structures to create a certain frequency on Earth. That was not bad. It was so that they could they could hire everybody's frequency. So it's not a bad thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that not everybody agreed with the policy. So when the structure started to fall apart, it's because people started to not agree with the consciousness that was created.
Oh, that's interesting.
So
nothing's ever black and white.
Yeah.
You know?
Right.
It's not good or bad.
Right. And the pyramids were part of that. They created a certain frequency that would keep the Earth at a certain level.
Huh.
And it didn't work for the Mu because they worked with the already existing Earth energy. They weren't there to raise it. They were just working with the power that existed.
So do people like Matthias that you talk to, does he ever go into the future and apocalypses and the end of times, anything like that?
Yeah. But it's like it's like you're sitting with the channel, so you have to ask a certain question to a certain time period. So it's I would have to specifically only ask him about one time period and see what he could get, because he's channeling the information.
Right. Okay.
But for him, if anybody knows who I'm talking about, Matthias de Stefano, he remembers his past life in Atlantis, but many other past lives. But specifically, he knows about that one time period very well because he was there, so he talks about it a lot.
Oh, interesting.
Which is really interesting because it's not like he's far off from all the other records, including the ancient records. But he just gives a little bit more detail of kind of this more ancient culture, the Mu / Lemuria, which it just makes sense because there is like a vibration across the other side of the world from southwest of the United States on past to Australia that has a different vibe than the other side.
All right, guys, super cool. When we come back from the break, we're going to break down the most famous top 10 failed prophecies and will AI kill us all? All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are back, and we're going to break down some predictions for the end of days. So get your notebooks out and write down some notes.
All right,
so
Mac.
you can survive the apocalypse.
All right, so these ones are... these get progressively crazier as I go down the list. But, there was number 10, it was the 2012 Mayan apocalypse that everyone was talking about was going to happen. Like, I don't know how many people predicted 2012 was going to be something hugely special. And what happened at the end of 2011? Everyone got shit-faced and woke up in 2012.
Is that what happened?
Nothing really happened. It kind of fizzled out.
Well, you could say
bummer.
You know what you could say though about 2012? It's back to your original thought, which was really smart. Was that the apocalypse is not what we think it is. It was a change. 2012 in some ways could mark like a new, like when we look back in 50 years, 2012 could be
revelation.
A revelation. We've really changed into a different society, an internet-born culture. Like I know that started a little before 2012, obviously, but it could be a marking point in the future for a change.
But only because we made it that way. Because we literally created a marker of which then we now have changed.
Huh. That's interesting. Subconsciously, we attach to it to make that change happen.
Yeah.
Like we change through fear. That's what I do in my own life all the time.
Was there anything
I'm going to die of cancer. I'm going vegan.